Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. Today we'll be talking about the 9th round already of the World Cup in Val di Sole. The first race in Italy in terms of World Cup since Fiuggi, so that was 5 years ago. Not much change in terms of the riders on top, but we will still discuss that. We are talking now with Twan and Issam. Welcome on the show, guys.
Hello.
Thank you for having me.
So, as said, the World Cup in Val di Sole took place. We'll first talk about the men's race, and there we saw another strong showing by Wout van Aert. Tell us about it, Issam.
Yeah, indeed. Van Aert that already was on 2 out of 2 when willing to make it 3 out of 3. However, Vanthourenhout, the one that started as a man with a mission, very fast, together with Iserbyt, the World Cup leader of this season. But however, close by was Wout van Aert, very attentive driving from him. And 2 out of 2 will eventually become 3 out of 3. But let's talk about how he did that. In the second lap, he tries to put them a little bit under pressure, gets a gap. He makes a small mistake in the third lap, allowing Vanthourenhout to come a little bit closer. Another one that made a mistake in that third lap was Eli Iserbyt, and actually that put him a little bit off the rhythm. And from behind, someone that is not having the best of season starts, Tom Pidcock, who came back relatively strong after a not so really good start. And they would battle for third place together with Eli Iserbyt. In the end, Pidcock would have the edge on Eli Iserbyt and actually finish on the podium in P3. But Vanthourenhout got then the second place secured after having some hope and trying to get a little bit close to Wout van Aert. But in the end, there was just nothing they could do to 3 out of 3 of Wout van Aert.
I mean, the parcours here in Val di Sole was a perfect one for Wout van Aert, in my opinion. He, of course, raced Essen yesterday. We'll talk about that a bit later. But the parcours here, yes, it was technical. No, Van Aert did not nail the technical sections. But it still required a lot of power because the top layer of snow was loose. And underneath it was a hard layer. So it was really about the power and the guys with the big engine. And we could see that Van Aert really has that. We, of course, also know that from his racing on the road. But in my opinion, it's not a surprise that Van Aert wins, especially considering that very long running section uphill, which without a doubt also benefited him as well with the combination of that section before. So I'm not surprised that Wout van Aert wins here again. And it confirms what we said last week, the talks of, I'm not that good. It was all just a bit to try and temper the expectations once again. Yes, the gap today was smaller, but in my opinion, it just shows Van Aert clearly the best here in absence of Mathieu van der Poel.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the gap being smaller. I think obviously that had to do with the parkour. This was in a way ideal for Van Aert because there were a lot of sections where you could use that power, like you said, and also that running. But I think overall it was a very clean race from his side. He was not really caught in any big troubles. Obviously, he made that mistake where Vanthourenhout got some hope and came a little bit closer. But at the moment, we have to conclude that there is just a gap between the full-time cyclocross riders and Van Aert at the moment. Van Aert is very strong. Obviously, I think he goes now for a training camp with the team, Jumbo-Visma, and he's then going to train a little bit, have some have the meeting with the team. And then when he comes back, we're finally going to see some battles with Van der Poel. So I'm looking forward to that. But we have to conclude that Van Aert is just very strong. And there was nothing they could do today as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that one. Van Aert, he only did a couple of laps pre-race. I think 3 or maybe he got 4 in, which was a bit strange to see because all the riders were saying you need to do a lot of laps. And I think it resulted in Wout van Aert's his technique being a bit rusty, but he can afford that with his power advantage. I mean, it's just kind of unfair. Like Vanthourenhout nails all the technical parts, but it's just 50 watts short of Van Aert, and then there's just no competing. I mean, of course, that's part of the sport, so it's not in that sense unfair, but I do think that Vanthourenhout did a very strong race, probably his best one of the season, and then to end second here, you could really see he was confident on the snow, sending it through the downhills, knowing which lines to take through the corners, and I think that just showed Vanthourenhout here. Recently, Ton and I talked about it off the podcast that Vanthourenhout had fallen back a bit towards the consistent level of just outside of the podium. But this is a step up again, right, Twan?
Yeah, this is the kind of performance you really want to see from Vanthourenhout. Just Being the second man today, very solid performance in the snow, and as you said, just nailing the technical parts, which is really important in a snow cross as well.
I think the team can be happy with the performance of Michael Vanthourenhout, Paul Sauze, of course, now having Vanthourenhout in second, and Iserbyt in fourth. Probably the performance of Iserbyt was a bit disappointing. What do you guys think about his race?
I think he was struggling quite a bit more with the snow and just adjusting like the whole race, and it really shows, just struggling a lot, and a fourth place to show for it.
Yeah, I think so as well, and maybe the cold also got to Iserbyt. I mean, this is just speculation. I don't know anything about it, but we do know that Iserbyt tends to suffer a bit with cold temperatures. Same does kind of go for Tom Pidcock, and it's not strange. These are two smaller riders, so they tend to get it colder earlier than the other riders. So that could have affected them, but Iserbyt overall, he did a lot of course practice with Vanthourenhout, and there you could already see that Vanthourenhout had more confidence. And I mean, I think a fourth place here for Iserbyt is nothing too shocking. It's a solid result, and I think he had fun today, and that was probably also an important factor. He was very positive about the parkour, and that's why I think he had fun, also looking at his reactions post-race, but he was very positive about the parkour. He said it's the most beautiful parkour of the season so far. What do you guys think on this new venue here in Val di Sole?
When I was a kid and it would finally snow here in the Netherlands, like, one of the things I absolutely love doing is just taking my bike out and just racing around, because I don't know, it just feels so safe in a way, because like there's no really crashing hard, and it just makes for an amazing experience, and you get to like really feel like you're putting it on the edge all the time. And I think it's just beautiful to see that they have that with this venue, and is certainly something that Cyclocross should try and look for a bit more, especially, of course, with it aligning with the Olympic ambition that is there.
I think this is a concept that is tried and that successfully has been tried. I'm a bit disappointed with the participation. I mean, obviously, you cannot control that as organizers, and I think they did a sublime job in the footage and the way they tried to promote it. It was really good. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the world championships in 1999, I think it was, in Poprad, which was 20 degrees minus, and it was crazy as well. And then you had that thing as well with the snow, that the snow was, it was stuck. It was not loose, kind of. You had like those trails that you can go through, but you can also avoid them a little bit and go on some newer snow. But I think this is something that is that is gonna work, I think, and it's gonna be more popular in the future. And I think it's already popular, and I only heard positive news, so I hope that this is something that's going to be staying for more than 1 or 2 years.
Well, I'm optimistic that it will, because the story here is different. It's more a story of, yes, it's organized by the local organizer, Bikeland Val di Sole, but in reality, it's really the Flanders Classics who have the keys in their hands of this race. It was Thomas van der Spiegel, the CEO of Flanders Classics, who wanted a race in Italy. He looked for a venue. He teamed up with Pozzato to do that. They came to this region. This is a region, the region Val di Sole, but also the region Trento. They want to profile themselves as also regions where summer sports are possible and define themselves as cycling regions. So they put a lot of money in, and it looks like they have a sustainable financial model. Spectators number were pretty okay, 2,500 spectators, and we were in the middle of the Alps. It's not easy to get here. People drove up all the way from Milan or from Trento, which are both more than 1 hour drives. And to me, it's impressive that they can get that many spectators out to this location. Promotion has been looking good, and the parkour also looked good, provided us with some stunning footage. But was everything perfect? No, not really. For spectators, it was a bit hard because there wasn't a lot of shoveling next to the parkour. Some of the crossings were very narrow, so that was a bit of a mess. But they can learn from that. It's not some kind of crappy race that we have seen sometimes in Italy, like in Fiuggi, where we had a very dodgy parkour, almost no spectators. This looked good, and I'm confident that this will stay on the calendar. And next year, probably will be back, and hopefully then the riders of Trek Baloise will come to the start, not only because for their own best will, but also just for the best will of the sport. And what I really liked about how they promoted this is that they really used the big names, Van Aert, Vos and Pidcock. Pidcock spoke a lot about the race, did some couple of clips and spoke about it, and that also helps. If we are now also speaking about Pidcock, what did you guys think about his race today?
I think he struggled a little bit in the beginning, then kind of got in a rhythm. Still had some mistakes here and there, in my opinion, but overall it was okay. I expected a little bit more from him. I thought that it was going to be technical enough for him. I have a feeling that he is someone that really can put a lot of risks in a couple of corners. Sometimes you even have the feeling that it's an all or nothing way of going into a corner. Which in my opinion was a good idea for something like this in the snow, but obviously he didn't have the greatest start, didn't really get in the rhythm in the beginning, and then when he got in the rhythm he had that battle with Iserbyt and eventually got, in my opinion, the highest possible position after everything, and I think he can be very happy with the podium finish.
I think so as well. He lost already 30 seconds in the first part of the race, and that's just the first lap. After that, he did a good job keeping the gap consistent, even riding faster than Wout van Aert at some point. But eventually, once we came towards the end of the race, Pidcock started making more mistakes, and I think that eventually cost him a potential second place. But, well, I think everybody has made mistakes here. Van Aert also crashed at some point, so... Well, it's just telling for this parkour. It's so challenging because there were a lot of corners which were just slightly off camber, which made it super tricky to navigate. So, yeah, I certainly like the parkour, as I said earlier, and I hope it's here to stay. Let's run down our entire top 10. We had that win of Van Aert ahead of Vanthourenhout, Pidcock and Iserbyt. These are the riders we discussed. Behind that, we saw Hermans ahead of Niels van der Putte, Kevin Kuhn, Daan Soete, Toon van der Bos, and the 10th place went to Corné van Kessel. Let's start with the rider in 6th place, Niels van der Putte. In my opinion, he rode a very mature race, once again pacing himself well, solid final lap, eventually just 1 second short of a top 5. I think he can be very happy.
Yeah, very strong race, and at the end nearly made the catch on Quinten Hermans, but just came a few meters short, as in the sprint he absolutely couldn't come around. But yeah, very good race once again by him, and this is what you want to see from him, especially in a field like this.
I think he liked the parkour, he looked confident on his bike, and as I said, a very mature race. What do you expect for the rest from the season of Niels van der Putte?
I think with Niels van der Putte, it's one of the better U23 riders, so we expect to see him around the top 10, sometimes maybe around the top 5, depending on the field and on the parkour, of course. And you just don't want to see him drop back too far in races like Zonhoven, for example, where he then gets 25th.
Yeah, I was looking at the under 23 World Cup standings. That will be hard. He had a bad race in Tabor, ending 13th. I think he had a mechanical issue there. But yeah, that's probably off the table. But of course, if he continues performing like this, the world title is not off the table at all in Fayetteville. And today he just looked like in his zone on the parkour. He was sending it through downhills, looking for the right lines, and that was what made it interesting. He spent a lot of time practicing the long straight before the uphill, which the woman ran and the men could ride for a bit. But that one was really tricky because it was in the shadow, so the riders had trouble seeing where the ruts were and where they should ride. And we saw a couple of riders crashing or almost crashing on the straight there. Kind of comparable to riding on mud, actually. So, yeah, I think he eventually got that one right and managed to continue riding. So, yeah, eventually in the final parts of the race, he also overtook Kevin Kuhn. But Kevin Kuhn, in my opinion, also did a very good race.
Yeah, Kuhn as well, somebody that has the experience in the snow, with a Swiss rider that did a couple of EKZ races in the snow. So he had a little bit more experience than others. And, he proved that today, getting a top 10, solid top 10 in a World Cup. Obviously, we missed the guys from Baloise Trek Lines, but nevertheless, a good result and definitely promising.
Outside of the top 10, there were some riders who slightly disappointed me. To name a few, Tom Meeuwse, Marcel Meissen, Ben Turner, but also the likes of Bertolini and Dorigoni. I expected these to be better, but they all ended more than 4 minutes behind. Tom Meeuwse, known as a snow specialist. Let's start with him. And Marcel Meissen, both snow specialists. What do we think was up with their race, or don't you guys have a clue because it wasn't broadcasted?
I at least have no idea. So I don't know what happened with the guys, but I can only assume, especially like you said. I mean, it was kind of like power, but then also a lot of technique and also a little bit of making sure that you go through the corners in the correct manner. So I think Meeuwsen and Meissen definitely had had a chance of getting in the top 10, and to be honest, I kind of expected Meeuwsen to do a little bit better than this. But then again, we don't know what happened in the first lap. It's very hectical, and you can lose quite a lot of seconds in the first lap if you're stuck behind somebody on a hill, or it's very tricky and very hard. So it's very hard to say if they didn't had any problems in the first lap. But yeah, kind of disappointing in a way, for sure.
Yeah, Meeuwsen, I did see him come from the back as well as Meissen. Meissen always tends to be a slow starter and then gain positions again, but today he just couldn't do it. But it's maybe also a bit of overcompensating after a bad start. And on a parcours this, I've said it already a couple of times, it's about making as little mistakes as possible. If you start pushing too hard and make too many mistakes, then you drop places, and that might be what happened here. Bertolini and Dorigoni never really got into the race. Maybe they just don't like racing in the snow. That is very possible. But yeah, I had a hope they would do better. And for Ben Turner, I just think he struggled with the snow a lot. I could see that in the downhills. He was not confident. In corners, he had troubles. The only thing where he looked really good was on the running section, but yeah, I don't think for Turner this is his true level, finishing more than 7.5 minutes down on the winner. So I guess we'll need to wait and see what that brings next week, because next week we're racing in Namur and Rukve, but Namur is the more exciting one. Let's go on and talk about our women's race then. That one was very exciting, especially in the final stages of the race. Twan, what happened?
We saw a very strong Vos Van Empel, and very confident as well on the snow, and she would lead for large parts of the race, as behind her the scene would change quite a lot. Some women struggling with mechanicals as well as crashes, of course, and but in the final few laps it would be Magali Rochette closing the gap very quickly and looking quite threatening, but Marianne Vos would overtake her and send it up the inside in one of the final corners of the race on Vos Van Empel, but she would clip a pole, and that would be her race over basically, as Vos Van Empel waited for her to get up basically, but then still roamed away from her, claimed the victory. Marianne Vos in second and Magali Rochette in third.
Let's talk about that phenomenal ride of Vos Van Empel a bit. What do we think happened? She set out very fast, she was confident, and then she had a gap of over 20 seconds, and it melted like, well, not I would say like snow in front of the sun, but there was sun and the snow didn't melt today, but her advantage just disappeared. What happened? Did she overcook? Was she starting to make mistakes, or what was happening?
I think she just ran out of energy at some point, and it just, yeah, it was kind of it, and it was just hanging on for dear life, and hope it was enough on that day.
I do think she overcooked a bit, but I also think it was maybe a bit of leaning backwards and relaxing, because, well, not relaxing, like really relaxing, but relatively relaxing. Already in the second lap, she had a solid gap, and Groenendaal, her trainer, already started saying, continue this and you will end up winning, which was very early in my opinion. But that was what he shouted after Marianne Vos had a mechanical, and Van Empel, she in the beginning consolidated the gap and then it started to drop. But because she didn't have an answer to Rochette and Vos closing the gap, I think she did overcook. But of course the mental mindset is also very important. Nevertheless, Marianne Vos, riding her first race since the ones in the US, second place, she could very well have won here because she had a mechanical and a crash.
Yeah, I mean, Vos was having an unfortunate time in this race. I think if the luck was a little bit more on her side, definitely have won, I think. And that's maybe bold to say, and it's if, but, in my opinion, she was the stronger woman today, and she was also the one with the most confidence. And we could see that the way she fought her way back to Van Empel, and in the last corners making that decisive move. almost made it stick, but then just the steering wheel or the steering was just at the pole, and it was done for her. And then I think Van Empel was very nice, letting Vos get back up on her bike and letting her even give her not a head start, but just start equal to go for the finish line. I would have done it a little bit different. I think a lot would have done it a little bit different, but she decided to wait. That's fair enough, and in the end there was no controversy, so in the end it was all good. But in my opinion, I think Vos could have won today and lost first place.
I think for Van Empel there was just nowhere to go. She was stuck behind Vos, and I mean, she could try and get around, but it would have been hard because there was not really space. The snow was super loose there, and with super loose, I mean, she could have disappeared into the snow with her knees, and then she would have probably still lost from Vos if she needed to run or ride. So I think Van Empel made the right decision. The crash was fully her fault, but I do think it was the right time to make the move. The finish straight was so short, only 70 to 75 meters, and yes, Vos has a crazy sprint, but could she have overtaken Van Empel? Very hard to say. I don't think so, but without that mechanical, for sure, I think Vos would have been there. That mechanical took ages to repair because her chain was frozen. A spectator helping didn't really help. So yeah, I think without that, we could have seen Vos win here today, which would be very special because if we go way back to our pre-season podcast, we were doubting a bit the abilities of Marianne Vos to still do good in cyclocross. We've seen the level being so high, and she's still competing here. Don't forget, she's a 7-time cyclocross world champion, so it's crazy to see her still fighting at the top. And we are now really have our confirmation. We're going to see a peak Vos at the World Championship. There was a bit of the question, which Marianne Vos are we going to see here? One that's going to need time to build, or one that's immediately there? Well, it looks like she's immediately there, and she can compete for, well, probably the world title, in my opinion. What do you think, Twan? Can Vos claim an 8th world title?
It will be very tough, but she's definitely in the pack of women that has a possibility on her day.
I agree, but maybe we also need to start adding Magali Rochette to that, or definitely for a podium, because today she claims another World Cup podium, 3rd, 11 seconds down. Yes, she gained a bit of time from the incident between Vos and Van Empel, but Rochette, in my opinion, put together a very good race, and to end 3rd, again, just a very strong performance by her.
Yeah, I must say I already added her to that list of potential podium contenders, or maybe even a little bit more, when she was able to do what she did in Besançon, and today is just confirmation, really in her element, and riding around with a lot of confidence was great to see.
I think she was the most confident rider out there today. She was looking good, was going well. The only thing was she was struggling on the part with a lot of corners after the start. So you had the start-finish straight, then you went right into the field, and basically from there until you came to the steep downhill, she looked to be struggling. I could not really see what was happening there, but I think for Rochette she was the strongest, but maybe couldn't get the laps together, and without that she could have maybe been even further towards Van Empel and Vos. But nevertheless, I think she can be happy with this race, and the same goes for the rider in 4th, Eva Lechner. She was with Rochette for a while. These two riders, in my opinion, have really put in a solid performance today. I mean, for Rochette it's maybe a bit less surprising considering her results earlier, although for Lechner it's not a massive surprise. But if I look at the results of Rochette, they have been so good recently since she came to Europe again. Like Tabor 10th, Urban Cross Kortrijk 8th, and since then 2nd, 4th and 3rd in top class races. I mean, I just can't keep stressing how special it is to see such big steps being taken. However, Issam, what do you think? Can she maintain this form until we reach the World Championships? Because there's still a long Christmas period going.
I think it's definitely possible that she will maintain this form. I don't see her drop very badly, and I think if she took the right approach to the season, and the goal is indeed the World Championships, which in my opinion I think that will be the goal. I think that she will be having that there is a training camp coming in, and there is some sort of kind of descending of form coming in somewhere, and then we will see again the the climbing of the shape, and I believe that she is an outsider for that world title. Obviously, she's not gonna be the main favorite, and I wouldn't really believe in her chances of winning. But I think for the podium, for sure, you have to watch out for somebody like that is used to race in the States, used to race in that part of the continent, and it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough for the Dutch women to really get a grip on her, and I think she's definitely an outsider there.
Let's run down our entire top 10. The podium was Van Empel, Vos and Rochette. Behind that we saw Eva Lechner, who put in a solid race on snow. And then we saw 5th place for Denise Betsema ahead of Helene Clauzel, Alice Marie Arzuffi, Sanne Kant in 8th, Puk Pieterse in 9th and Sylvia Persico in 10th. I would like to talk a bit about Denise Betsema. I think she had a bit of a disappointing second half of the race. Did she, just like Van Empel, overcook, or was it something else?
I have no clue, to be honest. I mean, I think it's a combination of being a bit overcooked in a way, and not having maybe the confidence as well. There were some mistakes made here and there, and I find like the way she's dismounting her bike and stuff, it's all just getting a bit slower, and also some parts she can do very well, but then it seems like her gearing is just a little bit too low, so she slips the rear, and it's all like moving all sides. You need to really have some balance, and in a way, I'm there were some moments that I was like, you can do better than that, and it's a bit of a shame. I think she has the potential, to be honest, in my opinion, to be on the podium. Definitely the strength, and normally for somebody that loves to ride in the sand, it shouldn't be the biggest issue, but I guess that it was a kind of an issue, and maybe the shape was not there, who knows. It was obviously very hard traveling, so it's very hard to guess, but obviously from what we saw, it was not really the best of performances, and I think she just overcooked it a little bit from the beginning of the race.
I think she does have the volume to compete here for a podium or a win, but she doesn't have the confidence and technique. I mean, I saw it a lot. She was going pretty slow through corners, and she could still fairly decently compensate for that with her power. So that leaves me to speculate that she lost that power, and that it went from slow corners, fast straights to slow corners, slow straights. That's kind of how it looked. She never really looked confident. She did improve, I must say, compared to the course pre-ride and even during the race in terms of cornering. But it's a big difference here is the snow is everywhere. Like, you have some sand sections, but you hardly have sand sections where you go like 20, 25 kilometers an hour and need to do steering. That's really rare, and here on the snow you have that in every corner. You approach the corner, sometimes with an even higher speed, and then you need to navigate through that corner, which feels like you're riding somewhat through sand in terms of drifting, but that can be very challenging, and I think Betsema just lacked that confidence a bit. And yeah, I mean, a 5th place in my opinion is still decent, but it doesn't look good for her World Cup classifications. I mean, she really needed a win here to come back into it, and even then it would be hard against Lucinda Brandt. But yeah, now she's still second despite having raced one race more than Brandt. Yeah, it doesn't look good. However, there were plenty of other riders in the top 10. Is there any name you would like to mention, Twan?
I think Arzuffi really performing in one of her best races of the season. I think that's worth mentioning as well as Peters having quite a tough day out there, which is very unfortunate for her. Of course, going all the way out here because she really wanted to be here, and then to come home with such a result is probably not what she would have wanted.
Yeah, Puk Pieterse only ending just ahead of Sylvia Persico. Persico was tipped in our preview podcast by Arzuffi, I think, to do good, or it was Lechner, I don't remember, but she was tipped to do good. Decent performance by the young Italian. I think her form is not as good as at the beginning of the season, but nevertheless it's still a breakthrough season for her, so she can be content with another top 10 at the World Cup. Outside of the top 10, I also saw some interesting names. I think Sydney McGill, the Canadian, 22 years old and 12, did a good job. Same for Anne Tauber, although I must say Tauber and Anne Terpstra both were suffering a lot through the snow sections. There was also other racing this weekend. Yesterday there was an Atheos Cross in Essen. We did not make a podcast for that because it was just not interesting. The men's race was dominated by Wout van Aert. He won with almost 2 minutes over Thijs Aert and Pim Ronhaar. Pim Ronhaar maybe was expecting a bit too much for himself. He said, I want to compete with Van Aert to end 2 minutes down. Well, maybe he just overcooked, that's what he said himself. Women's race also not that interesting. Zoe Bakstedt dominated from start to finish and won with 1 minute over Laura Verdonschot and 1 minute and 36 seconds over Anna Kay. Zoe Bakstedt here became the youngest ever winner of a elite woman race in Belgium. So that's definitely impressive, isn't it?
I think it's very impressive that she is able to do this at such a young age, but I do think it's important to make a note that this is probably one of the worst starting fields we've had in a women's race like this decade in Belgium. Maybe only, even Belgian championships are better. Maybe Meulebeke this year was like, and even then there were a few better people. So, but it was very impressive what she was able to do, just managing to take that race home, just absolutely dominating it from start to finish.
Yeah, startless quality was not great to say the least, but hey, you got to deal with the people who are there and be there or be square is what they say. So Bakstedt was there and won the race, but no, I do agree. The matter of winning a televised cross in or outside Belgium has dropped a bit because it's simply now with the World Cup so big, the ETIAS crosses have really lost their how do you call it? They've really lost their prestige. They don't add anything. I mean, it's just an ATS cross. If you win it, good. But in my opinion, winning a cross like this is not more special than doing what Cameron Mason did. He won 2 races in the UK, the Canfield CX and the National Trophy Series Round 5 in Cyclopark. The women's race in the National Trophy Series was won by Millie Cousins, and the day before it was Josie Nelson who won the Clanfield CX, but there was more racing. US National Championships, for instance, Clara Honsinger claiming the national title in the women's category, and Katie Klaus claiming it in the women under 23 category, Scott Funston claiming the men's under 23 title. Men's elite results are not in as we speak. There was also racing in Spain, where Felipe Orts claimed 2 victories in the men's categories, and Lucia Gonzalez Blanco claimed 2 wins in the women's category. And then finally we come towards our last races. They were in Troyes, and there it was Joshua Dubois who took the win today, and Loris Rouillet who took the win yesterday in the men's category. And in the women's category, Line Burquier claimed both victories. Well, that's certainly a lot of races. We haven't even mentioned all of them, but nevertheless, good to see this. This is actually the last weekend with this much racing. For now, it's mainly focused on Belgium. Next week, Rukve and Namur. I'm looking forward to that races. Hopefully, you guys do that as well. Twan and Issam, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
And we will be back this week with a preview podcast for the World Cup in Rukve, because Mathieu van der Poel is starting his season there. Unfortunately, not against Wout van Aert. Van Aert is on a training camp. Thanks everyone for listening to this podcast, and hopefully you guys will tune in once again this week. Goodbye.